What if death isn't the end, but an exam, a final test, given in silence, with no teacher, no second chances, and no memory of the instructions? For most of us, death is a mystery, a dark tunnel we pray we'll never have to face. But what if someone, thousands of years ago, mapped that tunnel? What if an ancient civilization left behind a detailed guide, a manual for the soul to pass through the gates of the afterlife? They did, and we call it the Egyptian Book of the Dead. But don't let the name fool you. This isn't a book about death. It's a book about how to live with awareness, so that when death comes, you don't just follow the light. You navigate it, because in the Egyptian tradition, what happens after your last breath is not automatic, and it's not guaranteed. You'll face questions, beings, tests of memory, integrity, and vibration, and only those who remember who they are pass through. So ask yourself, if you had to walk that path tonight, with no warning, no map, no one to help you, would your soul remember the way home? Part 1. The Journey After Death, the Egyptian View. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not the end. It was initiation, a crossing, a test, a journey through a realm more real than anything in the waking world. They called it the Duat dash, a shadowy dimension between life and eternity. Not a hell, not a heaven, but a labyrinth of challenges meant to strip away illusion and reveal the soul's true vibration. When you died, your physical body stayed behind, but your ka, ba, and ak, the multiple layers of your soul, continued forward. The ka carried your life force. The ba held your individuality, your consciousness, your will, and the ak. That was your potential to become divine light. But the Duat wasn't empty. It was inhabited by guardians, beasts, tricksters, and judges. Entities who could smell fear, feed on confusion, and challenge the unprepared. This is why the Egyptians prepared for death their whole lives. Because they knew you couldn't fake your way through the underworld. You couldn't lie to the gatekeepers. You had to be vibrationally aligned, truthful in your essence, or be devoured. And most of all, you had to remember, memory was your sword, awareness your shield. Without them, you'd wander the tunnels of Duat endlessly, caught in illusions, chased by shadows of your own unresolved life. But the journey wasn't just danger, it was sacred architecture. At key points, the soul would encounter judgment. Not from a god, but from 42 gods. Each one represented a law of cosmic order, ma'at, truth, balance, harmony. You had to declare yourself innocent before each one, not with proof, but with vibration. Because in the end, words meant nothing. Your energy was the evidence. Then came the moment no soul could escape. The weighing of the heart. Anubis, the guide of the dead, would place your heart on a golden scale. Opposite it, a single white feather, the feather of Ma'at. If your heart was heavier than the feather, with guilt, lies, attachments, distortion, you were devoured by Amit, the soul eater, not sent to hell, not reincarnated, erased. But if your heart was lighter than the feather, if your soul had truly remembered itself, you passed. You became Ak, a radiant, immortal being of light, free to rise beyond the Duat, into the eternal field of stars. The Egyptians didn't believe this was mythology. They believed it was physics of the soul. and they spent entire lifetimes preparing for this journey, not through belief, but through ritual, integrity, and remembrance, because in the end, the only thing that could save you was not a priest, not a god, not a ritual, but the purity of your heart. So the question is, in the maze that awaits after death, will your heart be light enough to pass? Because the next part of the journey doesn't test your beliefs, it tests your vibration. Part 2. The weighing of the heart, truth versus illusion. In the Egyptian afterlife, no soul escapes the scale. You can outrun the jackals, you can speak the sacred words, you can pass every gate of the Duat. But eventually, you arrive at the moment of ultimate truth, the weighing of the heart. It is not a metaphor. It is the final frequency check, a test that no title, no wealth, no belief can bypass. Anubis, the guardian of transitions, guides your soul to the scale. On one side, your heart. On the other, a single feather. The feather of Ma'at, goddess of truth, balance, and divine order. But this is no ordinary scale. It doesn't weigh matter, it weighs energy, vibration. Because in this dimension, truth has mass. Lies create weight, and your life has left a residue in your field. Everything you thought, said, felt, it's all there, encoded, undeniable. Did you live in alignment with your essence? Or did you wear masks to survive? Did you act from love or from fear? Did you betray your soul to please the world? You can't explain your way out. You can't plead. Because in this place, your frequency is your testimony. And if your heart is heavy, burdened by regret, by secrets, by self-betrayal, you fall. You're devoured by Amit, the soul eater, part crocodile, part lion, part serpent. She doesn't judge. She consumes, not out of cruelty, but out of cosmic neutrality. You're not punished. You're recycled, your essence broken apart and sent back, not to suffer, but to try again. But if your heart is light, if it beats in rhythm with truth, you rise. You ascend beyond the illusion. You are declared Ma Keru, true of voice, not because you spoke well, but because your voice echoed the frequency of your soul. This is what the ancients knew, that truth is not a concept. It's a state of resonance. And the heart is not just a pump. It is the center of vibrational memory. That's why the Egyptians focused not on dogma, but on living in harmony with Ma'at. They practiced truth as a way of being, because in the end, only a heart aligned with the universe could pass through its final gate. So ask yourself, if your soul stood on that scale today, what would be revealed? Would your heart rise, or would it sink? Because the illusions we believe in life become the weights we carry in death, and the Duat does not respond to what you hoped to be, only to what you actually became. And before a soul ever reaches the scale, it must first survive the guardians, the deceivers, and the riddles of the Duat itself. Part 3. The entities that test the soul. Before a soul can even reach the scale of Ma'at, it must first survive the maze of Duat, a realm woven with riddles, guardians, and illusions. This is where the real tests begin, not with judgment, but with discernment. In the Duat, the path is never straight. You'll encounter gates, 12 in total, each guarded by strange and terrifying beings. Some are monstrous in form, serpents with multiple heads, creatures stitched from chaos, gods with the faces of animals. Others look familiar, friendly, comforting. But this is the danger. Not every entity in the afterlife is what it appears to be. Some are there to test you, others to trick you. They'll ask you questions, challenge your name, demand you speak the right words. And this is where the ancient Egyptians knew something few modern souls remember. Words are power. Sound is memory. Vibration is truth. Each soul needed to carry with them what were called the words of power, sacred phrases encoded in energy designed to unlock gates, dissolve deception, and identify the false from the true. If you said the wrong name, you were devoured. If you claimed what wasn't yours, you were lost. But if you spoke from alignment, not just lip service, but with the resonance of truth, the gates opened. Because the entities guarding Duat aren't just monsters or judges, they're reflections of your unhealed wounds, your unconscious fears, your shadow selves made real. And so, passing through them wasn't about cleverness, it was about consciousness. Only the soul that could stay awake through the fear, stay centered in the chaos, and remember who it truly was, could make it to the end. And this is why the Egyptian Book of the Dead wasn't meant to be read after death. It was meant to be studied while alive, because no soul arrives in the Duat with perfect clarity, not unless they've prepared, not unless they've trained their awareness. To pierce through illusion, to hear beneath the words, to feel the subtle distortions of the false light. Because one wrong step, and you're lured back into the cycle. And so we ask, how does one prepare for such a journey? How do you remember sacred truths when death has already erased your memory? The answer lies not in memorizing lines, but in embodying resonance, long before death ever comes. Part 4. The Sacred Manual, Preparing While Still Alive. In ancient Egypt, the most important book you would ever read wasn't read while you were alive. It was meant to be read after you died. But here's the paradox. You had to prepare for it. While still breathing, it was called the Book of the Dead. But the original name was far more revealing, the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Because to the Egyptians, the soul didn't enter night after death. It was meant to emerge into a higher day, but only if it remembered how. This book wasn't a generic manual. It was personalized. Written with the name of the deceased, filled with tailored spells, affirmations, codes of power. Crafted specifically for the soul's journey through the Duat. Every copy was different. Every set of words aligned with that soul's vibration, karma, and path. And it wasn't placed next to the body as decoration. It was placed with intention, because it held more than ink. It held activation. At the funeral, priests would read it aloud, not just to honor the dead, but to stimulate the memory of the soul, to remind it of what the living mind had forgotten, to reawaken the code that would guide it through the illusions ahead. This wasn't a ritual, it was a trans-dimensional transmission. Because the Egyptians knew, death wipes memory. Fear clouds awareness, and the only way to pass the tests was to encode the truth in the soul long before it crossed over. They trained for death, the way warriors train for battle, through meditation, chant, sacred geometry, ethical alignment, and daily remembrance of their divine origin, because to them, death was not the enemy. Forgetfulness was. That's why every symbol carved in their tombs, every line etched into papyrus, every chant spoken over a sarcophagus, was part of an advanced system to anchor consciousness through transition, so that when the light appeared, And the guardians asked the questions, and the scales came into view. The soul wouldn't tremble. It would remember. And that's the lesson modern society has lost. We prepare for careers. We prepare for success. We even prepare for retirement. But who prepares for the only certainty in life? Who prepares for death, like the ancients did, with consciousness, not fear? Because in the end, no map, no mantra, no priest, and no text can replace the one thing you must carry through the veil: true awareness. Part 5. The Final Gate, Becoming the Light Itself. The ancient Egyptians were not obsessed with heaven. They didn't long for golden fields, or thrones in the clouds, or eternal reward. They longed for something far greater: reunion. Not with a place, but with the source of light itself. Because to them, the highest goal of the soul was not reward, but remembrance. The journey through the Duat wasn't just about surviving. It was about transcending. And only one type of soul could reach the final threshold. The one who had become Ak, not Ka, not Ba, but Ak. The radiant, transfigured being, who had remembered its divine origin and whose light could not be extinguished. To become Ak meant that you were no longer caught in the cycles of death and rebirth. You had burned away illusion. You had passed every gate, spoken every word of truth, and weighed your heart against the feather with nothing to hide. You didn't enter the light. You became it. And at that final moment, you stood before the gods, not with pleading, not with masks, but in full presence. No fear, no disguise, just soul, pure and unshakable. Because the ancients knew, no one grants you freedom. You earn it by dissolving everything that is not truly you. When you reach that gate, no one opens it for you. It opens when the light inside you matches the light beyond it. This was the real secret of the Book of the Dead. It wasn't a book of religion, but a book of resonance. A system for aligning your soul with the frequency of truth, so completely that nothing could pull you back into the loop. Not karma, not fear, not false gods, not unhealed pain, just clarity, just memory, just power. So when the final test comes, when the entities step aside and the veil dissolves and the vast gate of eternity rises before you, you don't bow, you don't beg. You simply walk forward, because you are the gate, and you've always been the light. Imagine it. Your soul, standing among the gods. They say nothing. They only look, because they see you. Fully awakened, unmasked, returned, no longer seeking permission, no longer proving worth, just vibrating truth. And the gate opens, not because you passed a test, but because you finally remembered what you've always been. So now ask yourself, not in fear, but in quiet clarity, if you will one day stand before that gate, will you know the words to pass through it? Or more importantly, will you become the light that needs no words at all? Final CTA. What awaits after death is not darkness, but decoding, not judgment, not punishment, but a test of memory and vibration. The ancients left us clues, maps, symbols, frequencies, to help the soul remember how to return to the source. You already know the path, you've just forgotten it. Subscribe now and begin the journey of remembering what your soul always knew, because in the next episode we go even deeper into the hidden maps of reincarnation, the journey through the in-between realms, and how ancient wisdom may hold the exact blueprint of rebirth itself. What if your return was never random?